Am I the a-hole for leaving my house and leaving my mother and 4 siblings homeless? I, female, just turned 18 last week, live with my mother and 4 siblings. Ages ranged 5 to 12, all different fathers. I've had a part-time job since I was 14. I was forced to watch the kids from a young age because my mother was either working or pregnant. She has no education, works whatever job she can find, and, well, she's an ignorant woman who never learns that having more children than you can feed is a terrible decision. And yes, termination is legal here, so it was her decision to keep them. I'm the only one with a relationship with my father. He never wanted children, but he's responsible enough to pay child support. This money is the family main income, and my mother uses it to pay for rent and utilities and like half the groceries. I have a good relationship with my father, so he also covers my medical and educational expenses. On my birthday, he told me he'd like to keep supporting me by paying for my university and also asked if I'd be willing to live alone. He never liked the idea of my mother spending the money that was supposed to be only for me with all my siblings. I was delighted with the idea, as I've wanted to move out for a long time, as I hate my living situation and sharing with kids, and I don't get along with my siblings at all. When I told my mother I'm moving out, she saw red and called me an ungrateful brat. She tried to blame me for leaving them homeless. They'd be unable to pay rent by next month as my mother has no savings, and told me I should keep living with them because I should care about my siblings. I yelled at her that I've lived off my father's money for 18 years, and that was enough. I don't want any contact with her anymore, and even less with those kids I don't even want to call my siblings. My friends are split about if I'm the a-hole. Some of them believe I should keep leeching off my father for the sake of my siblings. But honestly, I couldn't care less about them. I don't want to see my mother learn her lesson. And now for the top comments. That's an ugly situation. But no, not the a-hole. Your mom needs to be responsible and provide for her kids, not you. Her and the other fathers as well. Why the heck isn't she collecting child support for the other kids as well? Not to mention Opie's father is no longer required to give money now that Opie's an adult, but was still willing to. But also disgusted with his money being spent on the others as well. So if Opie stayed, they might still lose that money, which means the mom is in the same boat unless she gets Opie to give her all the money she makes from here on out. Not stay home. You are nothing more than a meal ticket and a source of babysitting. I'm a parent, and parents like your mother both enrage and disgust me. Honey, live your life for you. Leave and never look back. I would also make sure that she doesn't get contact information. The minute you start making real money, she'll show up with more kids. Let her hand out asking for you to support her life of stupidity. Congratulations on your freedom. Best of luck at school. This. Move out and cut all contact with those people. You do not owe them anything, and you do not have to keep toxic people in your life. Opie, what your mother is doing to you is called parentification. We see this a lot over r/child-free. It's what happens when idiot adults who should have never been allowed to breed refuse to learn their lesson. Instead of bucking up and taking responsibility for the children they created, the careless parent makes raising and safeguarding younger siblings the job of the oldest, and thus, theoretically, most mature/responsible. It is wrong, it is cruel, and it is child mistreatment. She freaked out because losing you would mean having to step up and be smart for a change. Without the designated pseudo-parent around, the real parent has no choice but to actually do their job. She made those kids, not you. She chose to keep them when options were available. She brought them into a life plagued by scarcity and hardship, mostly as a result of her own poor decisions. So those kids are her problem. Keeping them fed, clothed, and housed should be her burden to shoulder, not yours. Bottom line, not stay home. You're stuck in a quagmire, and it's doing everything it can to suck you down and crush you. If someone with a rope comes along and offers to pull you out, don't waste time worrying about the quicksand. The quicksand is not your concern. Say yes please, grab on with both hands, and don't look back. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my former stepmother that she has only herself to blame for me being my dad's favorite? I, 21 female, am technically an affair baby. More like a conceived through revenge baby. My dad, 56 male, married his high school sweetheart. My ex-stepmom, 56 female, because she was pregnant with a child that he thought was his, but was actually his former best friend's child. The second child was fathered by someone else. He raised my step-siblings, Amy, 36 female, and Ken, 33 male, thinking that they were his for years, until Ken got into an accident. exposing that it was impossible for Ken to have the blood type he did and be my dad's biological child. My dad was furious because he turned down a full ride to college to work 2 jobs because he felt like he needed to support his family. My stepmom begged for forgiveness and told him to think about how devastating the divorce would be to my step-siblings. For 3 weeks, my dad had disappeared without a trace, and no one could get a hold of him. The last thing he said to anyone was in a drunken voicemail that made people fear the worst. My dad was found, but in such a bad state that he had to be checked in, but refused contact with my stepmom and step-siblings while there. After a lot of pressure and begging, my dad agreed not to divorce my stepmom, but felt like he was owed something and decided that 2 could play at this game. And that's how I got here. After a DNA test, my dad was thrilled that I was around and made sure that I knew I was loved and a priority to him. So much so that he kinda neglected the first 2 children he raised. I didn't understand it at the time, but Amy and Ken resented me a lot because I was his real child, not my words, and I always came before them. My dad would always excuse it with the fact that I was so young, but he would outright ignore them a lot. My stepmom didn't really like me either, so my dad finally followed through with a divorce. He ended up getting the house, and when he died, he left it to me along with some family jewelry, the bulk of his savings, investments, and making me the sole beneficiary of his life insurance. He left Ken and Amy each $20,000. Amy and Ken were hurt, but I wasn't going to let them take out their anger on me again and be pressured to share. They threatened to sue, but my dad's lawyer assured me that I was in the clear. My ex-stepmom called me upset and demanded that I share everything equally, saying that a father shouldn't play favorite. Fed up with her BS, I told her that, "Lady, if you want to be mad that my dad had a favorite, then you need to blame yourself for sleeping around." It felt good, but my aunt feels like I was too harsh. Am I the a-hole? Edited to Ed. Saw this in a comment, so I wanted to be clear. 1. Amy's dad, who was my dad's best friend growing up, is dead. He died when Amy was a toddler, and was even my dad's best man. 2. Ken was the result of a one-night stand with a stranger, so he's going to have to submit his DNA into 23andMe or something to find out his paternal side. 3. My mom is still very much alive, and my dad left her something too. 4. I recognize that Amy and Ken were in an awful situation. I just don't really empathize because of how they treated me growing up, so I don't even care to have a relationship with them. My aunt, dad's sister, is the only reason why I would still see them, because she still wants a relationship with them. Edited to Ed too. Keep seeing a few more common things, so let me clarify some other stuff. 1. No, my mom didn't know my dad was married until after she was pregnant with me, and was angry at him for the longest time. I didn't know about any of this until I was much older, and I think that's why my dad left her something in the will. 2. Yes, my dad did get a DNA for Amy and Ken. He's not their dad. 3. I didn't say what I did with Amy and Ken around. That was strictly between their mom and me. Unless I was on speakerphone and she didn't tell me. 4. No. My dad didn't pay for Amy and Ken's college expenses. He would still get them the occasional gift for birthdays and Christmas, but after they turned 18, he stopped because he wanted me to have as many resources as possible. Not the a-hole. Your stepmother reaps what she sowed. I do feel empathy for Amy and Ken, but fortunately your dad didn't cut them off completely, so they shouldn't expect anything more from your dad's estate. I say go no contact with all 3 of them, and go live your best life, Opie, as your dad would have wanted. Oh, trust me, I am. I have no reason to speak to my ex-stepmom, and I'll only ever see Amy and Ken around my aunt's house and she still wants a relationship. But other than that, I'm good. They weren't very nice when I was growing up. Oh man, all of that was toxic as hell from the beginning to the end. I feel really bad for Amy and Ken, who did nothing to warrant their father figure's neglect. You don't seem to have a lot of empathy for them either, and I really hope you reflect and try to see their perspective. You're not obliged to split things equally. Your dad left it to you. I do hope you take this opportunity to remove yourself from a toxic situation, reflect on it, and move on. Nothing about what happened was okay. Try not to let your father's battle become your own. Honestly, he's arguably worse than your stepmom, because his choices hurt 2 innocent children. She's no saint, but he should have just left right from the start. You, Ken, and Amy are not the a-hole. Lol, do you realize they took their anger out on Opie? Opie was innocent too. This was the fault of the woman who didn't want to divorce her husband when he asked for one over her own entitlement to a relationship. Opie's father might have heard the kids had the parents got divorced, but not more than neglecting them for so long when the parents actually stayed in marriage. The ex-stepmom in this case cheated on her husband at least 2 times, failed to tell him that he was the biological father of kids, deceived him into raising someone else's kids for years. Then, when he eventually found out due to his supposed son's illness and spiraled, manipulated, begged, and guilted him into a marriage he clearly didn't want, and let her kids be miserable. How the hell do you excuse that? The man made his intentions of not staying in a relationship very clear, but the ex-stepmom pushed it till it broke spectacularly. I see that Opie's father might have acted like an a-hole, but he was put into this very glorious position time and time again. So, if we really analyze the whole situation, no one is the a-hole here except for stepmom, and in some parts the dad, who by the way still left $20,000 to both of those kids he resented. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for not helping my biological parents? I, 22 female, was adopted by wonderful parents. I grew up as an only child and am very close with my adoptive mother and father. I have always wondered why my biological parents gave me up for adoption. I never asked and don't plan on it. But when I turned 18, my parents asked if I wanted to know who my biological parents were, and they told me their names and where they live. I looked them up in social media and contacted my biological mother. She was very happy to hear from me and asked if I wanted to meet. They lived about 4 hours away. I took the time off of work and drove the 4 hours. We hugged and they were very thrilled to meet me. I told them that I had finished up college and working as a hairdresser. They quickly changed the subject and asked if I could lend them around $2,000 to pay off some debt. I was speechless and asked if that was the main reason they wanted to meet. My dad said, kind of, yeah. We need help with some finances. I got up and left the diner. I drove the 4 hours back home and told my parents what happened. They were very supportive and let me know that they loved me. My biological mother has been blowing up my phone wanting to talk, along with some money requests. I've denied every one of them and told them I no longer want to talk to them. Then biological dad reached out and called me a horrible daughter for hurting my mother's feelings. I've not heard from them since the last message. Am I the a-hole for not helping my biological parents? Not the a-hole. You owe them nothing. Children should never be responsible for their parents' debt. They only wanted money, not to get to know you. The greatest thing they ever did for you is giving you up. Children should never be responsible for their parents' debt, especially considering these aren't even her parents. They are strangers asking for a handout. Definitely not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Can you imagine growing up with them? You got lucky. And look at it from the even broader side. They immediately showed their true colors. They could have also first built a relationship and then tried to pull this off. They'd probably steal her paychecks if she got a job as a teen and be begging for money throughout her adult life. They only cared about her money, not her. Bullet dodged. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. They were horrible parents and you owe them nothing. Block their numbers and forget about them. I can guarantee if you've been homeless and penniless, they wouldn't have bothered with you. Oh, they would bother. They would ask her social security number and a couple of other questions. Last story is titled, Am I the a-hole for refusing to make my son apologize to my mother-in-law's goddaughter and undermining my husband's parenting? My mother-in-law's goddaughter, Amy, is not a nice person, but I'm the only one who seems to see it. So when I walked in on my 4-year-old son close to tears and being pressured by his dad to apologize to her for being rude, I immediately intervened. My son insisted Amy had said something mean to him, but she tried to make it look like my son misunderstood and was overreacting. From past experience, I knew she was lying. My husband kept insisting my son needed to apologize, but instead I told my son I believed him and that he didn't need to apologize. My son said, but Daddy said I have to, and I replied to tell him that he still didn't have to. I asked him to go pick a book for bedtime, even though my husband kept protesting and insisting he couldn't leave until he said sorry. After we put our son to bed, my husband had a huge argument with me. I kept saying I was undermining his parenting and teaching our son that he could get away with not listening to his dad. He insisted our son was being rude, and that was unacceptable, and that I was blinded by my dislike of Amy. I replied by telling him that he was the blind one. He also blamed me for our son asking if his dad didn't love him anymore. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Amy's 32. She told my son his dad would send him and me far away soon because he was annoying. My husband wasn't there when this happened. He interrupted them earlier while they were working to ask his dad to play with him, and Amy was upset that my husband actually did. I believe him, because when we first got married, she would say similar things to me. My son yelled that she was a liar, which is what my husband thought was rude. I'm sorry, but what the hell is a 32-year-old grown woman doing picking on a 4-year-old and reducing him to tears? And why is your husband allowing this? I'm going to say not day hall based on that alone. Like, Jesus, the kid is 4. If he says Amy's a liar and said something that he perceived to be mean, he's likely telling the truth. At that age, they don't usually make up malicious lies about adults. Exactly. He is a 4-year-old and didn't quite grasp that daddy was working. I don't agree with undermining the other parent, but I also don't think Opie was the a-hole. If I was her, I'd be asking her husband why he's okay with a 32-year-old being mean and disrespectful to a young kid and his wife. He is undermining both his wife and child but not standing up to the goddaughter for awful behavior towards them. I also just want to add quick that the husband thinks that his 4-year-old is bullying a 32-year-old woman? Not stay home. Sounds like Amy has a thing for your husband and doesn't like her time with him to be interrupted. Exactly. This is why she said similar things to Opie earlier in her relationship with her husband. I just hope there isn't an affair happening here. Amy is 32. Not stay home. It's important for a child to learn that an adult isn't always right and a child isn't always wrong. Also, Amy and your husband both sound like people who just want to watch your son do as they say. It's sad, but many people are that way. But she straight up told her child he didn't have to do what his dad said. She completely undermined his parenting and authority. How's that right? She could have took her husband to the side and settled it together, and decided if he should apologize.